We're happy that you were able to join us today. A little bit of housekeeping, if you're not as familiar with Microsoft Teams, at the top of the screen, depending on what kind of computer you have, at the top of the screen or at the bottom, there's a black ribbon. And for this meeting, we've got the chat enabled. So there'll be a little chat icon. If you click on that, at any point during the training, if you have a question, if you need a clarification, anything at all, please feel free to type that in the chat. And Monica will be, Monica's kind enough to monitor that for us. And and we will monitor that. So feel free to use that. And again, thank you all for joining us. We will go ahead. Let me walk you through what our plan is for the day, and we will get started. Okay, so you can see our agenda here. We're going to start off just a few minutes walking you through here, and then we've got our keynote presentation, and then we'll have a brief 5-minute break. And then Monica and I will walk folks through a mini session on the needs assessment, and then Thelma Hawkins will walk us through budgeting and finance. Then we'll have a 10-minute break, and then we'll end on session 3. We've got a career and technical education focus that will close us out for the day, and then Monica will have time for any questions or anything that you all need or want to reflect or comment on at the end. One important thing to notice too, if you'd like to earn ELA credit for attending today, there will be a survey that I will drop in that chat window at the end when we're closing. So that survey in combination with registering will ensure and verify that you receive ELA credit. And after the training, please allow 2 to 3 weeks. We'll maybe be able to get those out sooner, but we will email those certificates out to everyone. And so a little bit of a preview of what you're going to see today. We're excited about our keynote presentation. It focuses on storytelling, mentoring, and reentry. And Gigi Blanchard is going to talk about the work that she's been doing in New York with juvenile justice. And she's been focusing on storytelling and mentoring to impact student reentry. So she's going to share some success stories and some strategies for mentoring students that have been effective. And so Blanchard, she is a writer and founder of the Kite Zine, which is a storytelling and reentry program for youth and adults incarcerated in New York City. And so the program and her writing draw from her experiences, which she's going to talk about today in youth institutions. And one of the focuses of her program is focusing on stories because they can move people like statistics cannot. And she wants to inspire students to write their own narratives so they can see the change within themselves. And for session 2, we've got Thelma Hawkins, who some of you may know. She always does a fantastic job walking us through budgeting and finance. So she's going to talk about just the general overview of financial responsibilities for Title I Part D and some creative budgeting ideas. This session is going to focus on how best to budget funds, common issues, and demonstrate how to do an effective needs assessment, which actually Monica and I will talk about a little bit as well. So again, anytime you have questions during comments, anytime, please feel free to use that chat. And Monica, interrupt me if something comes up that's important. Please let me know.
I certainly will, Wes.
Thank you. And so folks, like I said, Thelma, she's our branch manager here in the Office of Finance and Operations at KDE, and she's a valued resource and a frequent collaborator of the Title I Part D program. So we appreciate Thelma being with us today and sharing her expertise. And lastly, our session 3, we've seen this question come up a lot, and we're really excited for the information that Carla Tipton is going to share with us about career and technical education strategies for youth and facilities. So this is going to talk about strategies and tools that can help delinquent youth receive the best possible CTE opportunities. And we know, Monica and I know from being out in the field, that every facility is different and has different opportunities and different challenges when they're trying to provide that career and tech education. And so Carla Tipton, she's worked in CTE for more than 30 years. She started her career in an area technology center as the school secretary and taught evening and industry classes. She also served as the state director for America's Career Resource Network, and she started working with the Perkins Funds during Perkins 2 as a state coordinator for School to Work. And now she's the branch manager here at KDE for the Data and Investment branch.
So before we turn it over to Thelma Hawkins, Wes and I are going to have a quick discussion regarding the needs assessment and the Title I budget. So we'll get right into this. What is the needs assessment? The needs assessment is very important. The needs assessment determines your strengths as well as your weaknesses. It is the framework for identifying improvements that may later address within the comprehensive improvement plans regarding your CSIP. How does it impact Title I Part D funds? It is your overall plan for strengths, improvements, pragmatic trends, and budgeting factors. What is the needs assessment and continuation? Each Title I Part D facility should have a needs assessment. It assesses your current state and uses your previous year's data. It looks at trends that you're seeing over the years, as well as areas for strengths, as well as also areas for improvement. The needs assessment is one of the greatest documents that you can have because it provides continuous improvement. It helps you to focus on your facility's greatest important needs so that way you can move forward with your goals. Not every facility is the same, and not every child is the same. We often have a Title I Part D application that is submitted a lot of times with the same narrative, the same Title I Part D budget from year to year. And we have to keep in mind that each year, all of the needs change. So therefore, within the Gmap system, your budget and narrative should not be the same. Also, you should see changes within your interagency agreements. Everything should change because every year is different. And I would like to pose this question before turning it over to Wes. If every facility and child is different, how can we have the same narratives and the same budget and the same information within the Gmap system from year to year? There has to be changes because every year your needs assessment change. Now, I will pass it over to Wes to discuss the needs assessment in further details. Wes, let me know if you're available.
Hey, thank you, Monica. Appreciate that. So, folks, let me pick up there, and we'll take a little bit of a closer look at the needs assessment and how that kind of works with the application and spending. Okay, so this looks a little bit at the budget and how it relates to the needs assessment. So like kind of alluding to what Monica had mentioned, the Title I Part D expenditures and budgets, would not be identical among different facilities. And so here's a key idea that's pretty important. So the purchases in a Title I Part D program need to be based on a genuine need, and that need should be identified in the needs assessment. So that's what guides the purchases. So a strong needs-based budget should focus spending on areas of student needs and adult practices that help meet those needs. So another way to think about this, if a requested service or a supply can be directly tied back to a need that's been expressed in the needs assessment, that does a lot of work in helping an expense to be allowable. And of course, in addition to being tied to the need, expenditures also need to adhere to the Uniform Grant Guidance spending rules, and a great tool that many of you are probably familiar with, that non-competitive federal funding matrix, which goes through allowable and non-allowable codes in the grant awards. And you're probably familiar with this funding matrix. It's the same one that you use for other Title I programs if you work with other programs. Okay, and you're probably familiar with this terminology too. One good rule of thumb when you're thinking about your needs assessment and how it relates to spending, you want to focus on this RAND acronym, which is reasonable, allocable, necessary, and documented. So that non-competitive federal funding matrix that we were just talking about, it helps to guide what's allowable and what's unallowable as far as expenditures in all federal programs. But in particular, when you create a quality needs assessment that's really authentic and really speaks to what your students do need in the current year, you tie that to your application plan in Gmap. And so you have items that are budgeted that are based on that comprehensive needs assessment. You've got an application plan that can pretty easily pass that necessary and allocable, two of those elements of the RAND. And also, purchases, again, are more likely to be approved when they're supported by data that's mentioned in an authentic needs assessment. Instead of just a generic or a blanket statement, you've actually got you've got some good data that's backing up this expense and speaking to a genuine need that your students have. Some other things to consider. As we had said, if you have a position like a staff member that's tied to a need, it's going to help that position be allowable. The need must be documented in the needs assessment. So again, it's in the application plan. You still want to make sure it's documented in your needs assessment and supported by data. That data is at least documented and spoken to also in your application plan in Gmap. You do want to make sure that you conform to the supplement, not supplant rules, and to reasonableness requirements. And so those of you working in subpart 1 know that supplement, not supplant, is even more important with that subpart as well. So in summary, this kind of shows how these three things work together. So how do we get from a needs assessment to a purchase that we can be pretty confident that's going to be allowable? Because that's one of the most common questions that we get, and understandably so. You want to make sure that when you have an expense that it's allowable under the grant and the statute. So that all starts with the needs assessment, typically done this time of year, looking at what the current needs are, what are the strengths, where are there opportunities to improve. And all this is based on analysis of multiple data points. That needs assessment feeds and speaks to the application plan. So it directs the application plan. So you have an application plan in Gmap that is based on the needs assessment, and it dictates how your Title I Part D money is going to be directed and spent. And then lastly, you have the purchases. And so the purchases that you make are going to be tied to the needs assessment and the application plan. So they all feed into each other. One thing that to keep in mind too, if needs change, there is some flexibility, but we recommend that once a quarter, you do take a look at your application plan and your actual spending in Munis and make sure that they are aligned. So that brings us to the end of the needs assessment piece that Monica and I wanted to speak to you all about. Thelma, we'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thanks. Can everyone see? I'm sharing my screen. Is everyone able to see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Oh. Good morning. I am Thelma Hawkins. I am the Federal Grants Branch Manager in the Division of Budgets and Financial Management. When Monica and Wes asked me to do this session again, I asked them, were they going to conduct another survey to see exactly what did you all want to know here? And so surprisingly, it was the same information from last year. So I thought, okay, what could I do different? But it's always good to hear the information. Hopefully you'll learn something new. They may have new staff that's on board. It may not be familiar with some of the guidance. So please feel free to ask questions in the chat during. And as Monica said, the PowerPoint will be available, will be sent out after. And any resources and samples that I may talk about during the presentation will also be sent out afterwards. So I'll get started. Okay. So some of the topics we're going to go over, funding, Gmap, the needs assessment, determining allowable costs, the funding matrix, time and effort, inventory, and records retention. And as I said, these are some of the things that were the outcome of the survey that was conducted that Monica and Wes sent out to everyone. Also, thanks, Monica, for asking for those introductions, because that'll kind of help me to gear the conversation a little bit more. It appears as though we have more facilities attendees today from DJJ and corrections, so that's good to know.
Yes.
Okay. So your funding, there are two types of Title I Part D funding. There's Subpart 1, which is the state agency funding. KDE receives those funds. However, we pass those through to the Department of Corrections and the Department of Juvenile Justice. So those are all the different facilities. So you receive your funds as a pass-through from DJJ and corrections. And one interesting note is that for the Subpart 1, your first point of contact should always be Amber and Lushina, because and then they will in turn, if they need to follow up with Monica or Wes about some things. On occasion, I have had questions about maybe like the reimbursement process. Well, I'm not familiar with that process for DJJ and corrections, so they will always be your first line point of contact regarding questions. Then Subpart 2, KD go to local school districts, and KDE awards those funds directly to the local school districts. And for Subpart 1 and Subpart 2, those funds are available for 27 months. So from July 1st of like your funds that you will receive July 1st of this year, those funds will be available until September 30th of 2024. So those funds are available for spending and planning for over a 27-month period. Okay, Gmap. Most of you are familiar with Gmap, not only with Title I Part D, but for other federal programs. I recognize some names in the chat, and I know most of you wear multiple hats because Title I Part D is relatively a small program, but with lots of requirements and moving parts. So the Gmap application is our online system for creating applications, and we use that to go through the approval process to award your funds. If I'm not Depending on how long you've been with the program, if you can remember, you will either receive a Word document or an Excel document to complete your application, which was, all that paper. I used to think about, how did we do that? How did the program office, manage that with all that paper? And I think the one good thing about Gmap is, well, I think there are several things, but you have all of your applications from the past years in one place, and when you are talking with your whether it's your consultant or with your state agency contact, you're looking at the same application. I know in the past, before Gmap, a consultant could have been talking to a district and they were looking at two different versions of revisions that had been sent. However, with Gmap, you pull up that 1 year and you're looking at, both of you are looking and talking and discussing the same application. Like I said, it's just a one-stop shop to have everything in one place. So what is a needs assessment, as Monica and Wes just discussed? The one question that always comes up and still comes up is, what can I spend my Title I Part D funds on? And as Monica and Wes discussed, it begins with the needs assessment. The needs assessment is a framework to identify those critical areas for improvement. So, you should be using your assessment data, test scores, also to, when you're working on that needs assessment, to determine what is going to be my plan for the upcoming year. What do my students need? What does my staff need? So it's just that body of work of planning to determine how you're going to move forward, what your focus is for that upcoming school year. Also, there's a link with more information about what Wes and Monica discussed on about the needs assessment. And so once you have developed your needs assessment, then you can start planning. Okay, what costs, looking at, how am I going to move forward? If you see that students are maybe struggling in math or reading, so do you plan to purchase some assessments for the upcoming year, or some kind of curriculum for the upcoming year for those students? And maybe as part of your needs assessment, you may have determined, staff need more training or professional development. So once you have determined what are some of those significant activities that you need for the upcoming year, you start to plan, look at costs. And so the cost, what will it take to carry out those activities that what you have developed, or what was the outcome of your needs assessment? So your costs for Title I Part D should always align with your needs assessment. Okay, so determining allowable costs. All costs must be reasonable, necessary, allocable, and documented. One that I always stress is the reasonableness. Just because you have the funding in the budget, is it reasonable to, and an example I always like to use is conferences. Yes, you may have funding in your budget to send 6 people to the conference. Is that very reasonable? Especially if the conference is in maybe California or New York or DC or Chicago, some of those really, high cost, high rate cities. So you really have to think about it. Just because you have the funds in the budget, you have to think about, is it reasonable to send 6 staff versus sending maybe 2 or 3, and rotate those staff when another conference or technical assistance or professional development opportunity may come up. So just think about that. That's one we get questions about all the time. People, well, not with Title I Part D, but other grants that have larger budgets, they want to send 8 to 10 people to a conference. And it's like, well, that's not really reasonable. And is it really necessary? So you kind of think about, doing something like a trainer model, send a few people to a professional development, and then let those individuals come back and share with others in your district or facility. And so the necessary part. Once again, when you're planning these activities, is it necessary? Is this really necessary to carry out and to implement implement the Title I Part D program? So I would think anything that's curriculum and student focus, it is necessary. You know, it's necessary to improve student outcomes. And so allocable, there are multiple times when in a district or in the facility, you may you may partner and collaborate with other programs within the district. So you have to think about, if you share costs. And you have to think about the number if you're sharing the costs with, let's say, Title II Part A, if you're doing a professional development. So you have to think about the proportional share of, your Title I Part D to your Title II Part A attendees, and just kind of, you want to be able to allocate the portion of costs that Title I Part D is going to pay compared to Title I Part 2. I'm sorry, Title II Part A. And you want to make sure those costs are very well documented, not only for shared costs, just any cost, any purchases that you make. You need to make sure those are very well documented. You have the appropriate signatures, your POs, just make sure any accounting that identifies that it is for Title I Part D. And just as a side note, the U.S. Department of Education is starting these rounds of what they're called improper payment reviews. And I really hate that term because it makes it seem as though, someone has done something wrong. And we're in the midst of 2 of those reviews. And the process is they look at some of our drawdown requests and access to send a detailed backup of, who did we pay? And so from that, they will select a few districts, and we have to contact those districts and say the finance officer and ask them to provide the backup. So if a district requested 500,000, they need to provide us what the details, the invoices, the POs, the canceled checks, what made up that draw. And as I stated, we're currently in the midst of 2, one with our ESSER 2 funds, and the other is with IDEA. And so it'll be interesting to see what the outcome of that. This is something that the U.S. Department of Education has talked about for years. We've been on several webinars, and I think with the influx of the additional COVID relief funds, they have moved forward with actually starting the reviews. And one interesting thing that they said is after this first phase of reviews, then they will determine if they'll do more rounds. So you may or may not, Title I Part D may or may not be selected for a round, but that's just something that, whether you're a school district or a facility, you should, have that documentation for all costs, purchase orders, invoices, and making sure that the vendor, whatever vendor you, that provides an invoice, make sure it's clearly documented what the item that was purchased, the cost, etc. Okay. Allowable costs versus budgeted costs. I still get questions mostly from the Support 2 districts. Allowable costs versus budgeted costs. The 3 guidance documents that we at KDE and you as a subrecipient should be using to determine and look at costs is one, is the Uniform Grants Guidance. That is the um, overall guidance for all federal funds, regardless of if the funds come from the U.S. Department of Education, U.S. Department of Agriculture, Labor. That guidance document has everything related to allowable costs, records retention, equipment, personnel costs, just everything that's allowable for state agencies, local agencies, nonprofits, universities. They collapsed in December 2013. They collapsed all of that into one document. Years ago, it was like OMB A87. OMB 102. And so depending on if I had a contract or something with the university, I had to go to a different one. However, they have collapsed in December 2013. They collapsed all of it into one guidance. And so which was so much easier. Then you have the education department general administration regulations, which we have come affectionately known as EDGAR, which that is the guidance that is specific to grants released and awarded by the U.S. Department of Education. And then the next guidance document is for Title I Part D. So that's the hierarchy of when Monica and Wes are reviewing applications. That's the hierarchy that they use. So it's not as simple as just looking at one document. When determining costs, we look at and if costs are allowable, we look at all three documents, and this is the same process that is used for Title I, Title II, Title III. They look at the UGG for Uniform Grants Guidance, EDGAR, and then the Title I. What does the Title I statute says? What does the Title II statute says? And so allowable costs versus budgeted costs. There are many costs that could be allowed under Title I, Part D. However, if you do not have that budgeted in your Gmap, well then even though it's allowed, if it's not a budgeted cost, you really shouldn't be spending. And I know you're thinking, well, I can't budget for all costs, and that's true. However, if the cost is if an allowable cost is very significant, and I would say anything 5,000 or more would be a significant cost, you should revise your Gmap and include that cost in your budget. So just like daily supplies, something that was not in your budget, that's okay. But I think any equipment or electronics or technology, regardless of cost, if that is not in your budget, I think best practice is that you should revise your Gmap and include it in there as far as technology and equipment. But I think any cost that is significant, and you can just use 5,000. I always tell districts 5,000 or more. It needs you should submit a revision in to your Gmap if it was something that was originally not in there, because there have been times when districts have said, my consultant said, this wasn't approved. And I was like, well, even though it was allowable, well, I was like, well, you should have included it. And I think most consultants that I've talked with, they are flexible. They'll say, okay, make a revision, submit it, and, so that it can be approved. Because we never want districts to be, or the facilities to be in a payback situation. We just don't, unless it is an item that truly was not allowable, and the district may have thought it could have been, but I can't think of anything that um, recently that may have not been allowable. I know with some grants, things may have been miscoded. I think with the one with Title II, Part A, if any of you work with that, that one tends to be a little tricky because Title II, Part A cannot be used for students. It's only for staff, faculty, district administrators. So funds cannot be spent on students with Title II, but that's one. But with N&D, I think I think you kind of have like a narrow focus because you're supporting those students, in the, well, for subpart one, in those facilities. So you kind and they have different needs. So I think those costs, you probably know what those costs are for me, even though, I know Monica and Wes mentioned that some of the plans may have the same information from year to year. However, the needs change, but uh, even though those needs change, maybe some of the supplies and the curriculum may remain the same, but you still would need to update that narrative part of your Gmap application. Oops. Oops. Sorry. Okay. So, but we're back to what can Title I Part D funds be spent on? And I think this might be a good slide to print and keep in your office. So, can I purchase? So, what is it that you would like to purchase? So, some curriculum, some math or reading curriculum. And so the need, is that a need? So, well, I would say you would, if it was in your needs assessment and you looked at test scores and assessments and you saw that students, scores were a little low in whatever content area, well, yes, that is an identified need. And then as you determine that need, those costs would be in your Gmap application. So when you are working on your application, you need to make sure that you include uh, those activities, those costs in your Gmap application. And also going back to, you have to remember making sure that all of the purchases are reasonable, necessary, allocable, and well documented. Also, remember all federal funds, regardless of what title program it is, all federal funds are supplementary in nature. So you should be providing, federal funds are to provide above and beyond what your non-federal fund sources are providing. So that's something to always keep in mind. Okay. And so this is just a sample list of what Title I Part D funds can be spent on, but I want to focus on the not allowable. So construction and any renovations, that's not allowed. Meals are not allowed, however, like refreshments and snacks. And so if there's a meeting or, maybe a parent meeting or something, you can provide like refreshments and snacks in those certain situations. However, when in doubt, always email Monica and Wes for subpart 2, for subpart 1. Email your contacts at Amber and Lachina at DJJ and Corrections. And also field trips for entertainment. One, Kings Island, that's one we always get. Field trips for entertainment are not allowed. Actually, no type of entertainment is allowed. And any field trips must be instructional in nature. If you want to go to the science museum or any type of museums, those or those are, educational, have an educational base. So just remember, no form of entertainment, no outings to like a skating ring or any type of amusement parks. Though entertainment is not allowed. Also gift cards. One I did put on here, alcohol. Yeah, surprisingly, that does come up. No alcohol is not allowed with federal funds. But when in doubt, just always, email your contacts. If it's something that you can't do, they may be able to provide you with other suggestions or alternatives for things that you can do. But this is just a sample list of allowables, positions, and things like that. The funding matrix. Everyone should 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 be familiar with the funding matrix. It should be bookmarked on your web browser, but the funding matrix is just the document that we use to determine what codes are allowable for spending. The one good thing about Gmap is that in the budget, the only codes that are on the budget are those codes that are allowable. So when reviewing, it has made reviewing quarterly munis reports easier because we know those codes are allowable. However, on occasion, there's a code that um, is not on the munis report, and it's been just in a matter of coding it incorrectly. And so it wasn't, even though it was coded in a code that was not allowed, it was an allowable expense, but just coded in the incorrect code. And that's updated annually, and everyone is familiar with that. And I added the link in there to make that a little easier for you. Okay, so to recap, once again, when determining what you can spend your funds on, you need to start with your needs assessment, which hopefully I'm thinking everyone has already, conducted that needs assessment because school will be starting in a few weeks. And once you determine what those needs are, it's next step. Okay, what costs? What do I need to get to this next step? What costs what will I need to implement my Title I Part D program for the year? And then that's when you start working on your GMAP application. But just remember, all of your expenses must be tied to your needs assessment. Any costs must be tied and budgeted and aligned with what was in your needs assessment. Okay. Time and effort. Now, everyone should be keeping time and effort for any federal grants that you receive. So time and effort is just the accurate reporting of personnel charges to federal grants. And, Title I Part D is a small grant, which if any personnel costs are charged to the grant, it's very unlikely that it may be one FTE. So it's usually a portion. What I've seen, it's been a portion of a salary. So if an employee is wearing multiple hats in a district and working across several different grants, well then you should be keeping time and effort to document your any work on that federal grant. And there are two types of certifications. There is semi-annual and a monthly certification. So if you have an employee that is working 100% and spending 100% of their time on a cost objective, well, then that employee will only need to submit that time and effort twice a year, and it has to be signed by the supervisor and the employee. However, if an employee is working across multiple cost objectives, well, then you need to keep that monthly time and effort certification. So if whatever you're doing for your other federal grants, Title I, Title II, you don't have to do anything different. Just you can follow that same format. It's nothing different for Title I, Part D. It's the same across all programs. And I have samples of time and effort that I'll include. However, if your district is already using something for Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV for the other federal grants, you don't have to do anything different. Just use that. If someone can, just a few of you can type in a chat that just, are you all keeping time and effort? Okay.
And so right now, Thelma, I don't have anything coming in the chat. So
Okay.
hopefully soon we should see some responses.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so yes, they said yes, they keep a monthly form.
Okay. Okay.
And
Yes,
they
because
said yes, we do keep time and effort.
okay. Because for the longest, years ago, districts thought they only had to keep time and effort for Title I. And it's like, no, it's for if you've received grants directly from the federal government or from another state agency, or if you receive, I know sometimes the educational cooperatives, they receive grants and they may award funds to districts directly from an educational cooperative. You should be keeping time and effort. So that's just something to remember. If it is for any federal dollar you receive, regardless of who is the awarding entity, you should be keeping time and effort.
Okay, and so we have several responses coming in the chat. And so Matt Spade said yes, monthly for instructional assistants, twice a year for teachers. Lachina said that she conducts semi-annual as well. And Jeremy Cameron said, we will this year. First time using it for personnel in a few years. So
Okay.
hopefully, yes, everybody will keep time and effort. And Amber said, we don't use Title I Part D to pay for salaries.
Okay. And so for those state agency, um, the state, for the facilities, DJJ and corrections, whatever your state agency uses, you can use that same form. Don't create any different, follow up with your HR to see what type of forms they use for time and effort, and you can use that same form, because I know, if for some reason there's a lapse in understanding and someone is not okay, just start from this point on, making sure you keep that time and effort. And for those state agency facilities, just follow up with your HR to see what kind of template they may have. And I'm pretty sure they are, because you all, those facilities, the DJJ and corrections, they receive federal funds from other federal entities. So just don't, if you already have something, please don't recreate something. But I will send samples out after, with the Monica and Wes will send out afterwards. Okay. Inventory. So inventory is just the process of documenting, keeping track of any purchases and equipment made with federal funds. So if you any equipment you purchase, the threshold is if you purchase something 5,000 or more, first you need approval from KDE, which that happens through your Gmap application. And then you should also be keeping an inventory log of all of those purchases. Now, if you're in a district, well, even for a state facility agency, you you should, for insurance purposes, someone in your district should have a log now of any equipment that was purchased. But however, the one thing for federal, there are certain items that need to be included on that log. So on the inventory log, these are some of well, not some, yeah, all of the descriptors that need to be included on your inventory log: the description of the equipment, the serial number, the funding source, the date and unit cost, when it was purchased, where it's located, um, and the condition of the equipment, and the disposition of the data or equipment when you dissolved, you was no longer using that piece of equipment, you dissolved it, whether you surplused it and it's no longer being used, well, then you need to have that date. So for districts, I know every district does it different. I know in some districts, the director of federal programs, they may keep a log for each one of their grant programs that they oversee. Others, it's uh, sometimes it's in the fiscal office, whoever maintains that inventory for insurance purposes. But anything purchased with federal, make sure that in log includes this additional information. And then I want to go back to, oh, I want to go back to this slide. One thing I forgot is that also any of those pilferable items, which those items that can be easily lost or stolen, needs to be on the log regardless of price. And so, that includes cell phones, iPads, tablets, iPods. Well, I don't think anyone, that was just some examples they had, cameras, camcorders, projectors, just things like that. Any of those items, regardless of cost, need to be on the log, and you can include that, technology, hardware, any technology, regardless of cost, needs to be on the inventory log. Okay. So records retention. So for financial records, the Uniform Grants Guidance states that, all records should be maintained for 3 years after the final date after 3 years after the final expenditure report was submitted. However, there are instances where there are a few exceptions where it may extend beyond those 3 years. There in the guidance, there are like 5 different exceptions, but I put these two because these are like 2 very common ones that could happen. So if for some reason uh, there's litigation with a particular year of funding source, well, then that year needs to stay open until the litigation has been resolved. and then for property and equipment. Um, the property records must be maintained for 3 years after the final disposition of equipment. However, we always say best practice is to maintain the current year and 5 years. Here, we keep 5 years. Here we keep 5 years. KD, we keep 5 years, and then we send it to archives for 3 years, because there have been instances when during for monitoring from the federal level, they've gotten better about asking for maybe like looking at the previous year or the previous 2 years, but in the past, sometimes they would go back like 5, 6 years, looking at 5, 6 years. So we've just tend to um, we've held on to retain records here for a little while longer. But would anyone like to put in the chat of how long does your district, what is your district's policy or your agency's policy for retaining records? Is anything coming through the chat? Oh,
No, not yet.
okay.
I don't see anything coming in the chat. Okay,
Okay.
so I do see something that recently came in. Deanna Crump mentioned R ends up being about 7 years because it is close to the grant, the close of the grant.
Okay, that's good. I think, yeah, that's good, because you just never know. You hate to dispose of records, but I think anywhere between 5 and 7 years, after the grant has closed is is good. You hate to, I know people think about space, but I think it's just good practice, because you just never know. Okay.
And Amber Skaggs mentioned in general, she said that they normally keep their records for about 5 years. And Deanna Crump also included another item in the chat. She said, you have to allow the extra time for the grant for the audit, and we do ours for the closing of the audit.
Okay, that's good. Yes, also, yes, for auditing purposes also. Okay, great. All right. Um, and so in close, so KDE is will be having a statewide federal programs training for the local school districts. It went out in the commissioner's Monday email to superintendents on Monday, July 18th. And I know, every district is different. I know some superintendents send it out to his leadership, but if for some reason you did not get that email, you should have gotten it maybe from whoever your grant contact is at KDE, because I know each one of the respective grants send it out to each of their district contacts. And so this is a training that's going to be provided by Brunstein and Manasseh, which is a education law firm in DC, and it's a training that several staff at KDE attends in the spring and December of every year. But it is, I mean, they are great trainers. They're gonna go over like the Uniform Grants Guidance and Edgar, and it'll give you all some insight as to, how, costs are, allowable costs, what things are allowable. And so it's gonna take a deep delve into that. I mean, it's great, and I always, they have these trainings. It's open up to everyone, and I always have encouraged districts, if you can attend one of their trainings, please, do so. I mean, it's a very it's costly. However, it's money well spent. But we are bringing them, Kate Brunstein and Manasavit, here September 20th, 21st, and 22nd. Now, it's a 3-day training. It's the same content over 3 days because we wanted to give districts, and the option. But if you are available on one of those 3 days, just please register and attend. I think we're still working out on the time. It'll probably be like from 8:30 to 3, maybe 2 or 3. And I think if you I know KDE was gonna pay for 1 night lodging if you lived 100 miles or more. I think that's what it was. I forgot to put that on there, sorry. But you can email Erin Sedith or Tara Rodriguez, but space is limited, so sign up quick. If you had not received those links, just click on those links when you receive the PowerPoint. But I would encourage you and your fiscal person to attend the training, because it's going to be great. And if you have the opportunity, I'm sure they'll be providing information about their fall forum. They call it a fall forum, but it's in December. It's like that first week in December, I think, and I think it lasts 3 days.
Thelma, it's November 30th through December 2nd.
Okay. So, but they will have information, and if you just click on that link to their website, it's just valuable information. And as I stated, several of us attend. I usually attend the spring because it's geared more toward formula grants, and it goes into specifics about the spring is really, to me, geared toward the title grants and Perkins. And so, but there's other information about auditing and fraud, and it's just a great training if you have the opportunity to attend theirs. However, we do want you to come, if your schedule allows, to the September training. You only need to register 1 day. It's just same content over 3 days. And then you're familiar with your KD contacts, Monica, West, and myself. And does anyone have any questions?
And if you do have any questions, please insert those in the chat.
Okay. Well, it was great. I hope we get to see each other in person next year, because I really enjoy this group every year with Monica and Wes. And so, but if you have any questions, just send me an email. And as I stated, when Monica and Wes send the samples, send their email out with the different resources, the PowerPoint will be included, and then I'll have time and effort samples and a sample of the inventory log.
Okay, so I don't see any questions coming in the chat. So again, thank you, Thelma. We really appreciate all of your expertise. I will turn it over to my colleague, Wes Blake. Thank you, guys.
Hey, thank you, Monica. And Thelma, thank you so much for your flexibility. We really appreciate that. Our technology folks have been working in the background, and they have addressed what was giving us trouble earlier. So, folks, we are going to hand things over to our keynote, Gigi Blanchard. So, Gigi, we'll hand it over to you.
Hi, am I here? Can you see me?
You're here. We can see you.
Okay.
And thank you for your flexibility.
All right. Like I was telling Wes before, when you work in the jail setting, you have plan B through Z. So we were kind of ready for that too, right? But I'm really, really happy to be here. And I just want to give my hat off to all of you guys too. What you guys do is not easy. working in this setting. And I can assure you, as somebody who used to be in there, that while you guys might not see the benefits of it right away, the impact that you guys make is there. You know, this is the darkest time for a lot of young people, and being a light, it does impact us, and we do see that, and maybe we don't show it right away. But thank you guys for that. So I'll just get right into it. I got my, I guess, my beginnings in this line of work when I was 15, and I was arrested for car theft. I was taken to a detention center in East St. Louis. And like many of your students, the trouble in my life started much before my initial arrest, right? My parents got divorced. My mom fell into addiction, and she was also bulimic, which for us meant nothing in our cabinets aside from vodka. So we took to the streets. My siblings went among friends. I did as well. And there was no shortage of things that I wouldn't do just to get a little money, a little food. And I ended up having some of my own addictions that started. And this was before 15. So I'll tell you, when I was arrested at age 15, there's a secret that I would have never let a teacher or another peer know. And it was that I was actually relieved to get arrested. There was 3 meals a day, snacks in between, my door locked, you know, no mom's creepy boyfriends hanging about. It was kind of nice. And I don't have access to the chat, so I would like to interact with you guys a little bit if I can. But when I was arrested, I was taken to the judge. Can anybody guess how much time I got for car theft, resisting arrest, and kicking a cop? This was in 96, East St. Louis. Wes, do you have chat abilities?
Yes, we're watching the chat right now. So if anyone wants to make a guesstimate at that. Nothing yet, Gigi,
Okay.
but there can be a little bit of a delay for the
there's
chat.
a delay. I'd be interested to know, especially with you guys working there, what you guys think somebody would get for that at age 15.
Someone guessed 6 months. So one person guessed 6 months, another person guessed 1 year just now. Community service was another guess.
Yeah, keep those guesses coming, because I'm really, really interested to hear what your thoughts are. And I know I'm in New York now, and I was in Illinois then, but I think that there are some common denominators in the states, right? So when I went to the judge, I was actually sent home, and I was really disappointed. I hit it. You know, we have to act hard and tough. We don't want anybody to know that we want to be in jail, but I was disappointed because of the peers that I met there. Were getting 6 months to a year for status offenses like skipping school and fighting. And here I had done all of those things, but I was getting sent home. Yep. Wes, you had
something? People thinking that I'm paying for STM training.
What's that? Okay, sorry. So I got sent home on intensive probation, and it wasn't long before I was trying to do what I could to get in jail. And so now I'm getting in trouble on purpose, right? And you guys might know, when there's drama at home, we pack it in our backpacks and we take it to school, right? And we unleash it on our peers. So I was getting expelled, got sent to an alternative school, got kicked out of that. I was doing whatever I could, and finally I got arrested the second time. And you guys can guess what I got the second time. But I got a program that time. I got a rehabilitation program. Again, I was disappointed because there's, you know, my counterparts were not getting the same sentence that I was getting. And in my 15-year-old brain, it seemed unfair. Like I was doing all of the things they were doing. Why do I keep getting sent home? So I got in trouble again, and I'll just tell you, third time was the charm. I actually got what they called in Illinois juvie life. I was adjudicated to my 21st birthday. So this was all within a year. By the time I was 16, I had got my sentence. And like I said, I wouldn't have told anybody that then, like, oh no, you're a troublemaker. Oh, you really did it this time. Like silently, I was like, yeah, this is what I wanted. I want to go away. I want the protection that was jail. And the unfortunate thing is that I didn't see anything else in the community. I thought that jail was the safe place, that jail was going to save my life, that I could eat there and I was safe, right? And I could tell you now that might have been 20 years ago, but you could see it a lot to this day. So I was in the facility, and about a year later, I'm up for parole. And not that I wanted it, but finally it was at this moment that somebody actually checked the home so that I could go home on parole. And that's when it was determined that the house was not fit for children to live there. It was unfortunate that they couldn't have did that when we were getting in trouble. When I was getting in trouble in the first place, it didn't happen until I was up for parole. So I was being on a wait list for a group home, which to me was, again, a relief, right? A sigh of relief. So I went to a group home, and, it's a new place, right? And this was before Facebook. I left all my friends. It was a goodbye. None of us knew where we were going after foster care or whatever. So goodbye was forever. We didn't know where to write each other. We didn't know that social media was coming out later. So it was very hard for us to transition to new places. And finally we get, through the kinks, and I'm getting through the program. I had taken my GED. Just so you guys know, I had pretty much given up on school myself before 8th grade, but I was being passed through. I think sometimes because I was a troublemaker, I was passed through some classes, but I hadn't taken myself seriously in education. I didn't see myself ever taking higher education, but because I lived in a group home, I asked to start attending a local community college, because I wanted to get off the group home's grounds for a little bit a day. And they were very pleased that I wanted higher education. So they allowed me to do that. So I'm doing all of these things and working my way through the program. And I'm told that because I'm doing so well, that they're going to let me off parole early. Sounds like a good thing. But to me, it was, okay, you're going to take away all the people that I have in my life now, my caseworkers, my counselors, all the people. Of course, they're required by their jobs to check on me. But after we're out of the system, we couldn't have contact. So to me, that was the worst news. So you guys might guess what I did, but I got revoked and I went back. And again, I was pleased to go back, because I'm going to go see my friends now, my sisters that I had acquired while I was in there. And from the outside looking in, it's like, oh, you really threw it all away, all this work you did. But in our young minds, we're like, no, this is what we wanted. This is security for us. So I'm sure that some of the mentors I had thought that they might have failed, and they didn't really. There was other things going on that drew me back to the prison. But this was borrowed time. Eventually, I got paroled. Laws in Illinois actually switched the date from the 21st birthday to the 19th birthday, because late 90s, it's overcrowded. So I did end up going back home. And it was very unfamiliar to me. I did not feel like I belonged there. And I really didn't know where I belonged. So I was doing all the things that would get one reincarcerated pretty quickly. But something happened at that time. And I had, by chance, actually acquired a mentor. This woman took it upon herself to see in me things that I couldn't see in myself, for one. And she became the motherly figure and adult role model that I didn't have in my life. And she was insisting, I had went to school and I've been through all this, you should do it too. And just to get her and please her, get her off my back and please her, I decided, you know what, I'll enroll in the university. So I enroll in it, hoping that this makes her happy, right? And it wasn't really until maybe the second semester, maybe a little further, that I realized, wait, this isn't for her. This is for me. I can do this. I might have really stopped paying attention in 8th grade, but like, I can do this. I'm doing it, right? And it really changed everything. Higher education changed the way that I saw myself, but it also changed my environment. Now I'm hanging out with students instead of on the streets selling drugs and all of the things that I was doing before. It completely changed my life. And time goes on. I graduated with my degree in anthropology from Illinois State University. I moved to New York right after my graduation. I wasn't tethered to any place. And I was still trying to figure out where I belonged, right? We're kind of like out there, some of us that come from the system. And I come to New York and, Facebook's out and I'm thinking, oh, Facebook, I can find those friends that I lost, right? And so I start searching for the girls that I was incarcerated with. And one after another, I don't find them on Facebook, but I do find them somewhere else. And you guys might take a guess where I might have found them. And I don't have access to the chat, but if you guys want to put something in there, I'll let you guys know. I found them on inmate searches. Pretty much one after another was doing a life sentence, basically, for one thing after another. We stay in the system. It's quicksand, right? But it's also home to us. So there's not really the threat of jail. And I was looking, at some of these girls had kids and their kids were already back in the system because they're still incarcerated. So this was really heartbreaking to me to find out. And I wondered, there are other things that we could, discuss why I wasn't impacted so severely. Race is a thing that plays a factor in this that we can't ignore. There are also other things. And I do think that me going to college and changing my environment kept me from going back in. And I felt that I had a duty to talk about it. And so I decided I would write my story. I had journaled, and journaling had got me through some of the darkest moments. And I really felt I needed to share how I was able to escape the system. And so I started writing as my form of protest. I had no desire to ever go teach in a jail or even step foot back in one because I really felt like it was a vacuum. And if I got too close, it would suck me back in. And I was terrified of it. So after I had published a couple pieces in local New York City newspapers and some online places, I was asked to go to Rikers Island to teach a standalone workshop. And I was terrified. I mean, just scared beyond belief, and not at the scary inmates, but really of myself and how I might be comfortable there. And in a way, I was not wrong because I was super comfortable, but I realized that was the bonus, that I could go into those places and share my story, inspire, and get out that same day still, right? I realized just within that first workshop, that one day, that I needed to be there. So what was a 6-week workshop that started back in 2016 is still going, and it's a full-on reentry program now here in New York City. And we're still operating in Rikers Island, and we worked with a campaign to raise the age, and we're working with the students we were still charging 16-year-olds as adults until 2018, and now they've been moved to detention centers, and we're working with them as well. And so just like I've shared my story with you guys, I open up my classes by sharing my story. Storytelling is balm to open up people, right? We find things that we find familiar with each other, and we hear it, and then we want to share, right? So I don't go in just asking people to tell stories. That doesn't work, right? You share your story, and it doesn't matter if it's young people or adults. You share your story, and it starts to create these bridges. Whatever in your story spoke to somebody else, they'll speak about that thing. And there is a healing in telling our stories. For the longest time, I was in the closet about having gone to jail after I went to college because I thought, people are going to think I'm bad. Everybody's, oh, you were in prison. Oh, you were bad. Oh, poor you. And I didn't feel like poor me. And also I didn't feel like I was bad anymore. I was told that for so long. And I realized actually, there are victims of circumstance, if you will. And I, won't, condone any acts of violence that also get young people in jail, but there are factors that result in our incarceration. And I think that we need to dig those out. And I call them following the breadcrumbs, right? There is a starting point to issues that we have. And I think that we need to talk about them so that we can discover them. And jail is a scary place for that because stories can be used as weapons, knowing what happened, especially with the young people, knowing things that make you vulnerable that happen can be used against you. And that was initial fears in the class by sharing. But what ended up happening, especially in our classes at Rikers, is that actually it helped create relationships between people. And it still does, because they can identify, wow, you went through that too? Okay, me too. Okay, why are we fighting? So like I said, we started the KITE program. And for you guys that work in Kentucky, I'm assuming that many of you might know what a KITE is, which is prison parlance for letters. They use it in Cali, they use it in Chicago, where I was incarcerated, here in New York. I imagine they use it where you guys are too. But a lot can, stories are in letters, right? You could put a bunch of letters together and find out about one person's life, or two people, many people. So I guess you could say that we also break sort of a rule by storytelling, because there's an undue familiarity thing in a lot of facilities, and that we're not supposed to, as facilitators and teachers, overshare. And our program is actually, we are oversharers. That's what we do as part of the business. And one of the things that we've created recently, and I'll share a couple other, and you guys feel free if you guys have questions, is some of our techniques. And one of the questions that I wanted to pose to you guys as well is, when a young person you might be talking or mentoring talks about going home and what they might do differently to stay out of jail, what are the top responses that some of you guys get? So I'll reiterate the question. If you're asking a young person how they are going to stay out of jail or stay out of trouble, what are some of the top responses that you get? What is their plan? And I'll ask Wes or somebody who could see the chat, because my security settings do not allow.
So far, Gigi, we have work coming in. Change my circle and who I'm hanging out with.
Okay, I'll give a couple more seconds to see if anybody else has anything.
Heather mentioned most do not have one, or at least not realistic one.
Ha. So work is an interesting one. I don't often get that one, but I always get change my friends, or I'm going to stay inside. Okay, that's not realistic, right? You're a human being. You'll stay inside for a week, maybe catch up on some Netflix or whatever, video games, but that gets boring. And then next week you're going to be outside. And then who's outside? Especially if we're living in the same area that we lived in before, the same circle, right? So it's not realistic to say I'm going to go home and change my friends and stay inside. It's just, but what could be realistic in changing the circle, especially in my case, was higher education, going to college. And many of our students do not, they had trauma in school. They're still traumatized by school. They want to hurry up and get that GED and be done with it, which is the same as I felt. But they don't realize that college is not high school. And they think that that same trauma and that same raise your hand and punishment and whatever experiences that they might have had at their schools is going to carry over into college. So they don't know what to imagine for college. And they don't think about that it's a whole new community of people. It's not high school. It's not just the people in your district, right? You can completely remove yourself like I did. I went to Bloomington, Illinois, totally different place, and created a whole new friend circle, my friends for life, I will say now. And so I really, really believe that that is a way to fight recidivism. And so we wanted to get really specific on how this might happen. And I don't know if the security settings are going to let me share my screen after the whole debacle earlier. Wes, I don't think that I have that actually, but I will make it easier. I don't know if you could pull that.
Is it not giving you the screen share?
I think it might actually. Look at this. Hold on one second. Because we created a guidebook. It says screen 1. So I guess that's my desktop, right? You guys are seeing this, right?
We see your desktop.
Okay,
yes.
You can see my my mind and how it works. So I'll just pull open this. So we actually created a guide, and it's called the Kite Guide to the Ops. And we had interns like this young man right here help us create this guidebook. With language and colloquialisms that we use, but also making sure the material made sense. And one of the main things is we call it the Kite's Guide to the Ops. And I know that sometimes New York City lingo takes a minute to get out there. So some of you may or may not know what ops are, but ops are oppositions, right? It's a big, big usage of this, especially in the jail facilities that we work in. And I think the words are very impactful and they mean something. So we want to recreate this word that is used so much, ops, to mean opportunity. So we're calling our guide the Kite's Guide to the Ops. and I don't have the cover on this website, but I have it in my hand, which I'll show you guys again. So we tell our students, you know, that if everybody in this jail used the same energy to take down opportunities as they do their ops, would this place be empty? And the answer is usually yes. Like this place wouldn't be we wouldn't have anybody here, you know. So what are the opportunities? This is very New York centric, the research that we did for the guidebook. But there also are some, you know, universal truths in it and what college is in and what it can be. Strategic plans. Every chapter that we have here also has, and I think if I just pull up anything, are you guys able to see it? I also had.
Yes.
Yes, we can see it.
I am not familiar with teams, so I apologize, but here is the actual book. We have, right, you guys are seeing the guidebook, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we actually have, you know, money talks. So we'll also compare, like, you know, the national averages of some high school versus high school. We were doing task here. Now we're doing GED. So we'll be the next volume changing that back to GED. But these are some average numbers, and this speaks volumes too. But we have activities. The book is made with a material that they can use their pencils, because we can't use pens in the facilities here. But they can use their little golf pencils and write in this as much as they want, right? And we do the thing that we do all the time, which is sharing, right? This was actual picture of me incarcerated when I got my GED in Chicago Youth Prison. And I talk about, you know, how I also hated school, but also, you know, like how I was able to stay free. And this right here, like I just told you, what are the most common things we hear is, I'm going to stay inside, I'm going to change my friends. Okay, it's not realistic, like somebody said, right? And so I'm happy to share more of this with anybody who finds this interesting. Let me see how to stop sharing my screen now. I think that's it. Did I do it right? Yes. I'm learning here, guys. So that is one of our biggest techniques, is bringing this guidebook in, and we have all the prompts that have really stuck throughout the years. But there's also some other things. And one thing I actually told Wes, I was preparing for our classes today, is we make stuff too. And this is just index cards, and I put adjectives on it. Friendly, courteous, thoughtful. I'm always trying to like pick up, you know, where the school might have left off that day, and like teach words and language and vocab, and this is part of that. But also, the students can't often compliment each other in jail, right? Even if they're friends, like playfulness, especially with the young people, is often mean-spirited. And so this is an opportunity to actually compliment each other and talk about the nice things about each other, and some relationship building. And I think that that's about where I'm at. I have a lot of other different little things that we use to create stories, but I want to give time if anybody has any questions for me, specific to our program, our technique. Like Wes said before, we do create a zine as well, and we publish stories in them. And as many of you might know, there's always some red tape in order to publish voices of those who are incarcerated. So we do, when we can get the permissions, publish those for the inside, but we also do it for the outside as well. Okay. I don't have
so far, Gigi, we don't have anything coming in the chat. Okay.
I can stick around for a minute, but that's really the kite and what we do. And again, I want to just compliment all of you guys, because it is a huge, just showing up, being present, being energized when you're there. It shows, you know. And sometimes you might think, maybe I'm not doing anything here, but when you're not there, you're missed. And some of you might know that when you haven't been there and then you come back there, where have you been? You know, it is impactful. We might not tell you guys that, but thank you guys for what all you guys do in these facilities.
Gigi, I have one question. If you could speak to, I remember we were having a conversation, you kind of mentioned that the work that you do, you're able to work with youth when they leave the facility. So after the point where students are no longer allowed to communicate with people in the detention facility, you're able to kind of work with them and kind of provide some mentoring, like job interviewing, resumes, things like that, and follow up with them. Can you speak to that a little bit and just how that works? Maybe with the eye towards maybe if any of the coordinators here would want to set up something like that, how would they do it? What's the advantages, that kind of thing?
Yes, actually, I'm really happy that you asked that, because I would have been like, oh, I forgot to mention. So part of the MO, originally this was all volunteer work. That's it. It was off the skin of our backs. But we were able to start getting contracted to run programs on the inside. And at that point, I was like, listen, like the job model is to go out of business, because if we do what we're doing, we'll keep people out of jail, and then that's great, right? So we all still, as volunteers, decided we would use the funding that we got to be able to fund the work on the outside as well. And part of that was paying our interns to do things like helping us write a guidebook, but also to give them job skills. And after doing it for a few years, we got noticed by local government grants, and now we're actually have the outside work granted as well, so we're able to do a lot more. And that is a job skills training program. And one thing that we created was a gamification system of job skills. We call it a job conditioning program, and these are all sorts of different sites. We're actually pop-up sites, because in New York City, even though we have 5 boroughs, a lot of the students cannot travel from borough to borough because of the ops problems and dangers and whatever fear they have of the subway. So we have pop-up workshops all over the city. And these are financial literacy workshops, some poetry workshops, stage prep. Some of them are gig work. We call it work study. This weekend, we had the Khalif Browder Foundation running a block party, and the students worked the food trucks. We have small businesses who actually, we have a lot of people go in as guests with us to talk about their jobs and how they created their own jobs. And they will take our students as work study interns as well, and we're able to pay them. So we pay our students $15 an hour to go get this job skill training, hands-on training. And part of it is to build skills on their resume and also references. Our students often, even adults, do not have anything to put on their resumes, skills or references or work experience, which makes it really hard for them to break into the workforce, therefore stay out of jail or the things that might get them locked up. So now we have a full stop calendar, and I actually had a calendar. I'll actually just share this again. This is part of what we're doing this month. All of these are different workshops that the students can sign up for. It's full. Even studio time. And the gamification is interesting. We actually let the students collect coins for every workshop that they attend. And so they, I had it pulled up a second ago, but I clicked it off, but they can collect, for example, I have we give this out to the students, the flyer in jail, and it tells them how many coins that they would collect. So they get 2 kite coins for financial literacy, 2 for stage prep, studio, learning about the music biz, 2, learning Excel spreadsheets, they get 4. And then we have a little marketplace where they can cash in the coins. And this is our way of also teaching financial literacy. If they cash in their coins as they go, they get a lot less. They can get actual cash with it. Or if they save it, they can get a lot more. And the idea is that we're teaching them to save it so that they can have a lot more and create interest with that. They can cash out and get sneakers, or they could save that and get double if they get through all of the workshops. And so I think it's been hitting really well. The students are always like looking to get more coins and seeing how many coins they would get, and also asking to create other programs and discussing how many coins we could create for that, because they do help us choose our calendar and create workshops. We want it to be interesting and engaging, but also teaching. So even if it's a workshop where we're doing poetry, timeliness is a thing, etiquette is a thing. We want to teach them how to be in spaces. We went to a museum last Thursday. We want to teach them how to conduct in spaces, especially when you're dealing with security who now they want a Vax card today, but they didn't ask the guy in front of you for their Vax card. You don't have to get wound up. You know, it doesn't matter, right? This is how you could be in spaces. And it's really important, I think, just that simple thing. And I do see the impact in it. We have some students that were in the program last year with new students this year, and it's so great because you could actually see this setting example from the student who was, you know, behind doing things like the other students are, if that makes sense to you guys. So the beautiful thing is we've worked with these students when they were on the inside and gained their trust, and we are able to mentor them when they come home. And I think a tragedy for, and I don't know what your laws are specifically there, but a tragedy in, you know, these students often don't have role models, and they do acquire mentors on the inside, but then the rule is that they cannot have contact with them on the outside. And I know that those rules are put into place for some past nefarious acts, and those things are real and should be, you know, the students should be protected. But at the same time, it's harmful in that they don't have that mentor anymore, and they get out and now they don't have anybody. And so it is attractive to go back to jail for that mentor and for that friendship, or that person who treated them like the mother that they didn't have, which you see often. So we're really lucky that we can write this into our proposals, into our work, that we are a reentry program, and reentry should start from the moment of incarceration and not the moment that somebody goes back to the community. Because what I've noticed with other programs that do reentry work, because we're constantly being asked, like, how do we keep our engagement? How do we keep our students? And I think it's because we were able to get the trust while they were inside and be there for them. And so when they came out, it's so overwhelming. Everything is so overwhelming that at least they know they can trust us. And whereas a lot of programs, they get stuck with them once they come home, and it's just another thing on their long list of things that they have to do to stay out of jail. And it becomes so overwhelming because you don't have relationships with these people. Who are they? Even though they're great programs trying to help, that relationship isn't there. And I think especially for young people, it is really important that we start at the point of incarceration. I hope that answered your question. It's a very complex program, but it's very effective. The gamification is definitely an essential key point to it as well. And of course, being able to pay them.
Thank you, Gigi. And a couple questions that, you know, a couple people had thanked you. Amber Skaggs had thanked you for sharing your story, and Adam Nance had asked if you would share your contact information. I did share the Kite Zine program website and let folks know that there's a contact tab there. And then
you can also share my email. I'm happy to answer emails. I'm in facilities a lot, so if I don't answer right away, I will.
Okay, and I can share that in the chat if that's okay. And then Lashina Crothers had agreed with you that it was a barrier, you know, speaking about that non-contact, you know, after leaving the facilities. Well, Gigi, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for you and Thelma both so much for your flexibility as we navigate technology. And so, folks, do you all have any last thoughts for or questions for Gigi? Gigi, I know we had talked. You said, are you still okay, like providing a brief bit, like a one pager or something like that, where we could send out to folks?
Yeah, totally, absolutely.
Maybe just speak into like some of your strategies to engage students in storytelling, like you've talked about, or maybe a brief overview of the reentry program. If there's anything like that, I did share the.
If everybody's okay with it, I might just create like a little Google Drive folder and just share that so you guys can see some resources that I'll put in there, including some really helpful things if you guys are interested in the storytelling aspect. Because regardless of what you guys, even if you're teaching math, I think storytelling is really a way to open up and get people to listen to you. And there are some ways to do it without over disclosing. I have some techniques for you, and I'd love to share some of the work that we've created, for sure.
Thank you so much, Gigi. We really appreciate your time today, and thank you for sharing your story. And thank you for sharing, you know, your work. It's so important, and we, you know, we appreciate your time. And so thank you. And folks, let's take a 10-minute break in case there are other people out there that drink coffee and things like that. It's about 10:55. We'll convene. We'll have our third session start at 5 after 11. Thank you. Hey folks, welcome back. Without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to Carla Tipton.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you all are having a good day. I found Gigi very interesting this morning. First of all, I want to apologize for the way I sound. Yesterday was my birthday, and over the weekend I was given an early birthday present of COVID. So, but because of virtual working, I can still continue. So that's a good thing. But like I said, I do want to apologize for sounding like a frog. But what we'll do is we'll go on and get started this morning. I want to talk a little bit about career and technical education. As Wes said earlier, my name is Carla Tipton, and I'm the branch manager in the Office of Career and Technical Education. I work primarily with Perkins, but I've been doing this work for a very long time. So I'm going to share my screen and we can get started. I'm hoping everyone can see my screen. Because I'm sharing Monica West, I can't see the chat now. So I am assuming, I'm hoping you all will just tell me if there's questions as we go and tell me if you can share my screen, see my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen and we will certainly monitor the chat for you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Monica and Wes contacted me because they told me that some of you all had concerns or wanted additional information on career and technical education for your facilities and being able to help students. So I've come up with a couple of different things for you today. These are two different approaches you can take from offering career and technical education in your facilities and how you can do that. I've also given this PowerPoint to Monica and Wes, as well as given them a resource, a list of resources for some career and technical education items that you might need. Okay, here is my contact information. So when this PowerPoint is shared, if you need to get in touch with me, please do not hesitate. I will be glad to help you in any way I can. I want to talk about two different ways to offer career and technical education, offering a complete CTE program of study or just offering certain CTE courses. First, we'll talk about what a program of study is when we look at from a Perkins standpoint. Perkins law requires what we offer in the state as a complete program of study. And we have in CTE, we have 150 complete programs of study that we have put out there for schools to use. A complete program of study is a sequence of 4 courses where a course equals a credit. So I know that there's facilities and schools that as little as a course could equal a quarter of a credit. But in CT, so you would have to have 4 of those to equal that 1 credit course. Any program of study must link academic standards, challenging academic standards, to your CTE content. So if I'm going to teach a carpentry course, you know, I'm going to also teach the Pythagorean theorem. And, you know, we teach it for years we've taught that, but we've never told the students what it was. They hear in geometry about the Pythagorean theorem, but they don't know that that's what they're learning in practicality in their construction course. We provide a non-duplicative progression of courses. And you know, I go out and monitor, and that's how I've really gotten to know Wes and Monica over the years. But I go out and monitor schools, and I see students taking the same course. I've seen them taking the same course 3 times, and it's not because they flunked the course. They've just been put in that same course 3 times. So this is a non-duplicative progression of courses. So, you know, if you're taking those 4 courses, let's take them in an order that makes sense and that students aren't repeating the same course year after year. We align secondary to post-secondary for a complete program of study. And what that does for us is it's like when you went to college or you had your program of study and it outlined what you needed to take your freshman year, you know, through graduation. And we do that in a program of study, but we do it at least 9 through 14, if not 9 through 16, depending on the program of study we're working with. So students can actually look at their freshman year and say, okay, I need to take this. My sophomore year, I need to take this. If, you know, I want to get an associate degree in a certain area. We have multiple entry and exit points. And what that means is, let's take health science for, because it's easy, as an easy example. But let's say I'm a pre-nursing student. And as a pre-nursing student, after my high school year, in my 12th grade year, I take the CNA or the my nurse aide certificate class, industry certification, that I can be a nurse's aide at a long-term facility or in a hospital. And I get my industry certifications for that. And then I decide I want to go back to school. And I go back to school for a year and I get my LPN certificate. And then that's an upgrade for me. And then I go back and I decide I want to take additional classes to get my RN degree. And I take and get my RN license. And then I want to get my bachelor's in nursing. So all of those are multiple entry and exit points, but you see how that works. You can do something for a while and then go back. We provide opportunities for dual credit and or work-based learning for students. Dual credit can be academic or technical dual credit, and students can have but also one of the things is all of our programs of study have to have a complete 4-course sequence that does not include a dual credit course, because not all students are eligible to take dual credit. So a dual credit can be an academic dual credit, or it can be a technical dual credit. But if it is in the technical field, they also have to have a course that's open for all students. All of our programs of study lead to an industry recognized credential, a certification, or an associate or bachelor's degree. And that's that second or post-secondary linkage that I talked about. But the industry recognized certificate can be at the end of, you know, the freshman or the end of your 12th grade year. You can get a certificate at the end of the 12th grade year. We have programs of study online or in-person courses. A program of study taught in person maybe must have that 4-course sequence. It has to have a certified or appropriately endorsed teacher. Not anybody can just teach a CTE course. So if you're using those CTE course codes, it must be an appropriately endorsed certified teacher. And it must meet those requirements that I just talked about for a POS. If we're teaching an online course, there's regulations that the department has put out around teaching those online courses. Are those courses aligned with valid course codes within the pathway? And would the student be eligible to count as? Will students have access to a highly qualified teacher? Now, yes, that is a CTE or a Perkins requirement, but we also think it's very important that a student have at least some contact with that highly qualified teacher. And do the standards for those virtual courses align for the standards for career pathways? So is the course you're teaching in that, I told you about the 150 pathways. So are those virtual courses aligning with those pathways? Most programs of study, if you're teaching a complete program of study within your facility, would be for a long-term student. My understanding is from your facilities that you might have somebody there 6 weeks, you might have somebody there a full year. And I understand how that can be difficult. So one of the things when I talked to Wes and Monica was to talk to them about teaching more short-term courses and teaching a course versus a long-term program of study. If in your facility you do not have a certified teacher, a certified CTE teacher, then you can still use those standards and curriculums for a course. And what I've put on here is I've put on here what in legislation that, Monica, can you see that I changed this?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. In state legislation, it has in here what those CTE fields are and how the instruction of those programs work. I'm not going to go through all of this for you, but that link is in here. When you get this PowerPoint, you can pull that up if you want to know how that legislation reads. I've also put in here for you resource linkage for each program of each program area that we have in CTE. So you can get on here. Now, some of them say, you know, you need to contact the consultant, and that's fine. I have put their email and information on here for you. So this is easy for you to get to, and it'll give you information for any of those areas that you're interested in. We talked about, when I talked with Monica and Wes, I talked about, we talked about 2 courses within CTE that we thought would be good for short-term students, for students that maybe not be in your facility for a full year, but would be easy to teach and be easy to be broken down by units. And so I want to share just real quickly some of those, some things around those 2 areas. The first one is personal finance. As you may know, that personal finance is required for any student graduating from high school in the state of Kentucky. It may not necessarily have to be a course, but those units need to be taught through something. We just have a lot of schools teaching it by a course. In the personal finance, and what I've given you here is personal finance standards. The 6 standards that are required in that curriculum: earning income, spending, saving, investing, managing credit, and managing risk. And I've given you the link to the national standards for personal finance. On the handout that I have sent and the resource list that I have sent to Wes and Monica, there's also a lot of other links to other courses or other resources for personal finance. But this is really where you need to look just to get those core information. When I look at the national standards, what they do is they break it out for you. Like this one is on earned income. It gives you a definition of what earned income is, how it's worked, how you work. It says this is for 12th graders. I think this could be done actually for younger students. You could break it down for students a lot younger than this as well. It gives you the standards that students will receive, that they need to know, and their learning outcomes. And it gives you this kind of information for each of those 6 standards. So being able to take this, any teacher can take this. You don't have to be a certified CTE teacher to teach these standards in this curriculum. The other course I pulled out is Fax Essentials. Fax is Family and Consumer Science Essentials. I've given you a link here to get to the courses for fax and being able to look at those. And then what I did is I went on that resource and I pulled out just an example of a couple of units that they have around Fax Essentials that I thought any student would need to know. I mean, as we graduate students, sometimes we forget those essential skills that they need to just operate day to day. It's kind of like Gigi talked about. Sometimes we just forget those essential skills for students. And this way we have some of those areas by unit, and being able to work with students, whether it's relationships or it's nutrition. Students need to know those kinds of things. So if you don't have that Fax Essentials or that Fax certified teacher, it doesn't mean you can't help students in those areas. So folks, I know I've talked pretty fast because I don't know how long my voice is going to last. And I apologize, but I do have left time for questions for you. And if anybody has any questions for me.
Carla, I am monitoring the chat, but currently right now, I don't see any questions coming in. I know that there is typically a kind of little bit of delay, so I will just wait a couple of minutes just to see if we have any questions that come in. So feel free to ask your questions.
And if you think of anything later, you can let us know. But any CTE related questions that you may have, Carla is a fantastic resource. If anything comes to mind, feel free to put it in the chat and we can kind of chat about it now if you think of something.
And if not, and something comes up later, they have my contact information. And I appreciate you all wanting to know about CTE. Like I said, on that resource page, it gives our consultants for each area in CTE in Kentucky. We're very lucky that for each of our program areas, we do have a CTE consultant that works just in that area. So if you want to do something around personal finance or Fax Essentials or even ag or construction, there are folks that have specialties in that. So,
Okay. Carla, thank you so much for that information. I do notice that we do have several questions coming in the chat. So one question is there a brief example you can provide for how this would relate to adult correctional facilities?
well, you could teach these same types of units around for anybody, I think. But what I would then suggest you do for adult facilities, the Department of Corrections has an education coordinator that I work with just for a CTE and some of the CTE programs within those adult facilities. And so let's see, it's Steve Meadows, I believe. Steve, I'm sorry, I've lost his name, but I believe it's Steve Meadows. And within the adult facilities, Steve can give you some information. Like I said, I think some of those units would be helpful for anybody. I don't know the background of some folks in those adult facilities. However, I do know that sometimes, as Gigi said, we quit listening at the 8th grade. And so maybe some of those types of things can be incorporated into those same courses.
Okay. And there is another follow-up question, and maybe Steve Meadows could follow up with this particular person if you can address it. Again, it's still related to adult institutions. How does this courses apply as far as progression apply? So how will it apply?
Okay, when I talked about the secondary and post-secondary link, most of our courses and for the state approved courses, we've linked through KCTCS. And so if there's a program of study that then we have a linkage, and I don't know, Monica, if I sent that to you, but I will, that has outlined a lot of those courses around what would be followed at the post-secondary level. And I'm also not sure, I know at one time, the Department of Corrections was aligning a lot of their work in the adult facilities to the curriculum at KCTCS. So these align in that way.
Okay, thank you, Carla. Are there any more questions for Carla regarding CTE?
Once again, I thank you for allowing me to present CTE to you today. I've had a passion for CTE for a long time, so I believe that it's something that we need to have for all of our students. So thank you.
And thank you, Carla. We really appreciate all of your expertise that you bring to the table, especially when it comes to all of the CTE programs. So thank you again for being one of our presenters today. Okay, Wes, we'll go ahead and get started with the closing. If there's not any more questions.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, Monica. And Carla, I hope you get feeling better. Thank you so much for joining us when you're under the weather. We really do appreciate that. Please feel better.
Well, I am feeling better. Like I said, it was a wonderful birthday present.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Very
not
thoughtful.
only was it bad that it's one of those ugly birthdays, but it's also that you've given this as I was given this as a gift. So,
I'm so sorry.
Yes, me too.
but I am feeling better, and so all will be good, I'm sure.
Hey, Monica. Monica, this is Steve Meadows. Can I make a comment here before we conclude?
Sure, that would be great. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, Carla, I want to thank you for the kind words there. And I gave you a script on how good we are over here. So I know your voice won't allow you to speak through that, right? But our
I'm sure,
corrections.
Steve.
Just for the benefit of all others who are on here that may be interested in the corrections, as Carla stated, our, I guess, roots of our curriculum for our CTE trace back to KCTCS. We had a kind of a dissolution of that partnership back in 2010. And again, for the benefit of this community, we're gravitating and working towards reestablishing that partnership with KCTCS and other post-secondary institutions. So we're excited about that. And the one of the main drivers of that, I will add, is the reinstitution of the Pell Grant awards to incarcerated populations. So it's a win-win for everyone, but especially our students within a pipeline of adult education following through to post-secondary opportunities, especially in trade-related skills and CTE. So thank you again, Carla. We appreciate it.
And thank you, Steve, for your insights. We really appreciate that. And if you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to Steve as well as Carla to pick their brains because they have a wealth of knowledge and we really appreciate both of them. So any questions you have, specifically reach out to Carla as well as Steve can also help to assist you. We are down to the closing of all presentations today. And I will answer any questions that you may have lingering from all presentations and from all the presenters. Please insert those within the chat if you have any. And Wes, feel free to help me monitor the chat if we have any lingering questions.
Will do.
Okay. And I apologize for the pause. I'm just trying to make sure that we address everyone's questions.
Nothing yet, Monica.
Okay, so we'll move right along to the next slide. Let's brainstorm together. It's time for reflections. How will you implement today's ideas into your program? So we have heard from 3 awesome, great presenters. We have heard from Thelma Hawkins with finance. We have heard from Gigi with her implementation of the kite. And we have also heard from Carla Tipton with her resources that she has regarding the CTE programs and how you can implement that into your facilities. So again, how will you implement today's ideas into your program? And feel free to insert those in the chat. And what are some key takeaways?
Monica, I'll give folks a chance to think and I'll be monitoring the chat for you.
Okay, thank you, Wes. Is there anything new that you would like to adapt or start from hearing today's presentations? Or is there anything you can work on to help evolve your facilities?
And you all can feel free if there's something you want to add in the chat, or if you'd rather just just talk about it. You can unmute yourself. There's microphones either in a black strip at the top of the screen or it'll be at the bottom of your screen, little microphone icon. So either way is fine. And so Monica, Heather mentioned that one thing that she wanted to implement after today that made her think was to continue to incorporate more CTE options, as well as more engaging ways to meet students' needs. And their goal is to aid more with transitions and beyond.
I love that idea, Heather. I think those are great opportunities to grow at your facility. Incorporating more CTE options for the students is a big key point. So I really enjoy that. And just not just focus on the normal transitions, but going above and beyond. Those are great concepts. Okay. And
Monica, Alvin Ellsbernd mentioned that one thing that their program would like to implement is to continue working towards providing students with additional CTE opportunities. And Lashina Carruthers mentioned a key takeaway was using that needs assessment to continue to support the strengths as well as areas of improvement. And Sabrina McElroy mentioned that yes, in all caps. So yes, the main thing that was important was making more CTE opportunities for their students. And Matt Spade mentioned that they have a new principal at Raymond Estep, which actually I remember us talking about that. And so that information is really helpful with learning how to set up, how to utilize program funding for his students. So good. We're glad to hear that.
yes, and we are so glad to hear all of the key takeaways, and especially regarding the CTE opportunities and as well as the needs assessment, and thinking of ways of how you can utilize to enhance your particular institutions and finding out what works best for you, and just adapting and making it better for you to have a more successful program. All right, next slide. Thank you guys for sharing. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. We appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today, and we hope that you all gain a wealth of knowledge. Before we let you go, if you need Ely credit, we would like for you to click on the particular link. There is a complete the post training survey within the chat. And Wes is using his pointer. If you look on the screen, and he is particularly pointing out where you can click to complete the post-training survey.
It's in the chat right now, Monica. I just shared that link for the survey. It's just 2-3 questions, very brief, and we'll use that we'll just use that as evidence, that we'll be able to go ahead and send your Ely certificate via email.
And thank you so much, Wes, for inserting that link within the chat. And this particular survey link helps us to plan for next year's Title I Part D training, and it also allows us to get a chance to tailor our training around your specific facility needs. So definitely, please complete this survey because it also helps us. It's a very resource to help us to help you. So we really appreciate it. And if you have any further questions regarding the Title I Part D program, please feel free to reach out to Wes Blake or myself, and we will definitely try our best to answer your particular questions. And on the screen, we have our contact number. So if you have any questions regarding Title I Part D, please feel free to reach out to us. And again, I just want to finish up by saying thank you so much for your time and attention. We hope that you have enjoyed the training today, and we apologize for the technical difficulties that we had this morning, but we are so glad that you were able to join us, and we hope that you have a wonderful day. And don't forget to complete the survey.